Hello everyone and welcome. In this video we are checking out my brand new 2016 Subaru Crosstrek. There are 140 miles on the clock. I've just purchased it. And I'd already done a video explaining why I purchased this and the other vehicles I was looking into. But really I just wanted something that was super practical, had good ground clearance, and wasn't a big SUV. And this pretty much, fit the bill perfectly. It's got 8.7 inches of ground clearance, so really good clearance. Gets good fuel economy. It's rated 31 on the highway. It's got plenty of storage space, lots of space for rear passengers, so it's a great road trip vehicle. All-wheel drive, which I of course want for the winters around here when I go up to the mountain and go skiing. So really it's just, the perfect all-around practical vehicle that I was looking for, and so that's why I went with it. Now this is the 2.0i Premium. It's the highest trim you can get with the manual transmission. If you do want the limited with leather seats, things like that, nicer, infotainment, that kind of thing, then you will get a CVT transmission rather than the manual. There is no manual offered up there. And really I did want the manual, and I also like cloth seats a lot better than leather seats. I'd driven a leather seat Crosstrek and you kind of slide around in it. The seats are a little big. But with their cloth, you're not going to slide around as much. And they're actually pretty comfortable, pretty nice seats. They're still a little wide for me, but not a big deal. This isn't a sports car, so it's not like I need them to be super snug. It's real comfortable for long trips, things like that. So I am excited about it, as far as a road trip vehicle, which is something that my STI really wasn't. And people ask, why did you sell the STI and get a Crosstrek? And it wasn't really that I was trading the STI for a Crosstrek. I really wanted a rear-wheel drive sports car, and that's why I got rid of the STI. I got the S2000, and then this was kind of the daily practical driver that's great for road trips and the kind of thing that I like to do. For example, just yesterday I took this out to a trailhead, which I never even would have attempted to get to in the STI. There was large rocks all over the place, really rugged, lots of up and down hills and things like that. Where this STI certainly would have bottomed out, and this had no problem. I was surprised I didn't scrape at all, because I thought I was in a few scenarios, and it was like, man, first time driving this car and I'm about to scrape it up. But thankfully I didn't scrape anything. Plenty of ground clearance, which is really nice, to get out to those obscure trailheads and things like that, or just go up to the mountain when it's snowing. So nice from that perspective. But there are some bigger differences than just ground clearance versus the STI. A lot of people said well, you just have the STI, you raise it up. And first of all, just raising a vehicle, you're not going to have the right suspension geometry. It's not going to handle the way it was designed from the factory. They're going to, when they lift this vehicle, they make tweaks on the Impreza so that it's not going to handle like a lifted Impreza. It's got the right geometry put in. So they think about it more than just, raising it 3 inches. But aside from that, it gets much better fuel economy than the STI. It gets regular gas versus premium. It has the same size tank as the new STIs, so you can go much further on a tank, and that's a big thing for me because I like to go on long road trips, and in the STI you're constantly going to the pump because the tank is relatively small, and the highway fuel economy is 23, which is pretty terrible, and so you can't get very far without filling up. So that's a nice thing about this. Plenty of fuel as far as, your range. And also the interior is much quieter, obviously. It's more comfortable for long road trips. And I didn't buy the STI thinking it was going to be this practical road trip vehicle. That's why I bought the S2000. Same case, they're not practical vehicles. I knew that going in, but I'm just explaining this is a benefit of it over the STI for the people that think that, I could have just lifted the STI. So, a lot cheaper from a fuel standpoint, cheaper from an insurance standpoint. And also, a better vehicle for long trips. And it can go places where the STI couldn't. So there's some significant benefits to it. And it also has more passenger space in the back, so I can take, 2 friends in the back, 1 up front, and still have plenty of space for all of us, whereas the STI was a bit more cramped. Now, why did I choose the manual transmission versus the CVT? Well, the real story is the manual transmission is a manual transmission and not a CVT. That's why I did it. I think they're a lot more fun, they're more engaging, and that's what I wanted. On the other hand, I can see the draw to the CVT. It does get slightly better fuel economy, but some other benefits of this: it's lighter. It's about 80 pounds lighter than the CVT transmission version. It's also about $1,000 cheaper than the CVT, which is another good benefit. One of the other unique things about this is the gearing. So the final drive ratio in the manual Crosstrek is 4.444, repeating forever, I guess. And then the CVT is 3.7. And the first gear, the lowest gear setting of the CVT is very similar to that of the first gear in this. And so what ends up happening is you get about a 19% more aggressive gear in this than with the CVT. And so that translates to more wheel torque. So you're actually going to get better acceleration in the manual transmission than in the CVT. I believe the 0 to 60 is something like a second and a half or so quicker than the CVT. And a lot of that has to do with the gearing. It's also slightly lighter, and you don't have power losses through the manual transmission like you do in a torque converter with the CVT. But regardless, it is a quicker vehicle. The one thing you do sacrifice is you get slightly less fuel economy. I think it's rated, this is rated 2331 versus the CVT is rated 2634. That said, I've seen, floating around 40, high 30s driving on the highway in this. So I think it's going to get great fuel economy all around. I'm not really worried about it, and I was willing to take that, small hit in fuel economy for the other benefits of the manual transmission. So under the hood of this is a 2-liter Boxer 4-cylinder, dual overhead cams, produces a whopping 148 horsepower and 145 pound-feet of torque. So literally half the power and half the torque of my STI, but not a big deal. It gets way better fuel economy. And the engine's well suited for this vehicle. It's lightweight. It's only a 3,100 pound SUV. It's just a lifted hatchback. It's not an SUV. But regardless, it's only 3,100 pounds, which for an all-wheel drive vehicle of this size isn't too bad, so it's decently lightweight. I think it has enough power for what it is. It's certainly not quick, and it's not thrilling, and you're not going to put your foot down and be impressed. But you know that going into it. You're buying a small, compact SUV or whatever you want to call it. It's not a thrilling machine, but it's ultimately, a very practical machine, and that's why I went with it. Now, is it perfect? No, there are some things that I don't like about it. First of all, I do wish that it had a 6-speed transmission rather than the 5. It's not that it's that big of a deal. I just think, you get a bit more flexibility with 6 rather than 5, and it could be a little bit lower RPM-wise on the highway than what it is. Another thing with the transmission, it does have a little bit of rev hang. So if you're on the gas and then you switch gears, you do have to wait a decent amount of time for that RPM to drop. Now, it's very similar to the WRX in that sense. With this, I don't mind quite as much because I don't necessarily want to shift quickly like I like to anyways, but the desire isn't there. I'm not driving in a spirited manner, so it's not important that it shifts quickly, but the thing is it won't shift quickly smoothly. So you can either shift quickly and it won't be smooth, or smooth and it won't be quick. Now in a vehicle where you don't care and you're just kind of puttering around anyways, like this, no big deal. That said, it's just kind of irritating that you press in the clutch and you wait for that RPM to drop. The other thing that's kind of interesting about that is if you're learning a new vehicle and you're learning the clutch of a new vehicle, when you have that rev hang, it makes it much more challenging to correct your throttle position. So when you're starting off from a stop, and if you accidentally give it too much throttle, it's just going to float up there. Rather than with a mechanical throttle, you can just back off a little bit very quickly, and you can instantly adjust that ratio of throttle to how much you've let out the clutch in order to get that perfect start. So when you're just learning it, it's a bit easier to have a mechanical throttle than these electronic ones that kind of hang up there. But aside from that, it's not a big deal. I do like the clutch. I do like the transmission as far as the shifting is concerned. Long throws, but a nice secure feeling to them, and also a long clutch throw to it, but it also uses a good amount of that range. Very light effort on the clutch. Large range at which you're actuating it, so you do have decent control. The one thing's just that rev hang, which is kind of annoying with shifting gears. Another thing that I'm not thrilled about is that they've put, instead of a coolant gauge on here, you just have a hot or cold. So it shows you a cold symbol that's blue that says your engine is cold, or you can have a red symbol that's hot that says, your engine's too hot. So you have no idea when you're in the normal operating range what temperature it's at. You don't know if you're close to cold or if you're close to hot or where you fall in between. So you're clueless as far as your coolant temp, which I think is kind of stupid. I don't know why they would get rid of that. And maybe they did it for simplicity, but okay, here's the thing. It has an MPG gauge on the cluster, which doesn't show you a number. It just shows you a little MPG gauge that goes to plus or minus, and anywhere in between, but relative. I mean, you don't know what the scale is. So it's just telling you, basically where your throttle position is, if you're flooring it or not. And it's like, well, I know that. My foot's on the throttle pedal. So I think that's silly. Get rid of the MPG meter. Put in a coolant gauge so you can actually know what the engine temperature is, and call it a day. And I'd be pretty happy with that. But these are overall minor things. I really do like the vehicle, and the few tweaks I would make would have to be to the throttle, adding a gear, and giving it a coolant gauge. Super practical. I mean, this is as practical as it gets for a vehicle all around, where you're not sacrificing fuel economy, to get something that's super big. You could, of course, get something larger with more space, but then you're not going to be as fuel efficient. And it's not going to drive like a car. It'll drive much more like an SUV. And that's one of the nice things about this, is that, it's based on an Impreza. It is a car. And so it drives a lot more like a car than an SUV, which is kind of boaty. And, you get those curves and bounce around. So what options did I choose? Well, one of the things, I read quite a bit of people saying the stock audio was awful, and that was the case in my STI, so I went ahead and upgraded the speakers in this to, I believe they're kicker front, so the tweeters as well as the speakers. I also got all-weather mats, cover, rear cargo cover, covers for the back seats, rear bumper cover, basically covers all over the place, splash guards, just because I know what I'm going to be doing with this. I know I'm going to be getting mud and things like that in here, and so just making it easier for myself to clean in those scenarios, and keep the vehicle itself clean, and then just wash those covers that are all over the place. I also did get a cargo box for the top, so about 17 cubic feet, which is basically another STI. That's larger than the STI's trunk, the current STI's trunk, so another STI trunk that you can throw on top of the vehicle. So plenty of cargo space if I go camping and bring, 4 people and want to bring all kinds of gear. So overall, I'm super pumped about having this car. I mean, it does everything I want it to do. Tons of cargo space, good fuel economy, plenty of passenger space, and it's got all-wheel drive and plenty of ground clearance, so I can take it wherever I want to go. So thank you guys for watching, and if you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave them below. Hello everyone, and welcome. This is a Honda S2000, and it's not just any Honda S2000, because it is my Honda S2000. I just purchased this yesterday as the official new project car for Engineering Explained. No, it isn't quite a Dodge Viper. I'll give Saab Kyle credit. That's an epic car. Congratulations on getting it.